Okay. I think we are live. Luis and Nathan here with me.
Exciting.
Today, if you guys are getting this stream, we are talking about raising the security tide. So we want to talk about what that means to us over the next 12 to 18 months of what has to change, grow, get better, improve in our service deliveries and what we do and what our vendors do across the entire gamut of this. So anybody that wants to pop in as we go after we get started, I'll bring you on screen. You guys can jump in and kind of tell us what your thoughts are. But Luis, I'd like to hear from you first. What does rising the tide mean to you over the next 12 to 18 months? I know that's a giant topic, but
I know, like it's so different, so difficult to put in specific words. But if I had to choose one phrase to say it, I would say it's collective conscience is maybe the best way I can describe it. It's it's doing the right thing when nobody's looking is another
okay,
way to say
collective
it.
conscience, not collective consciousness. So I'm glad you specified. I went to a different place, but we do need a
words
collective
words
conscience.
matter. Yeah, words
Yeah.
matter. But the other piece that I think you were thinking about what I just said when I said this one is the doing the right thing when nobody's looking.
Yeah.
And I think MSPs in particular are super responsible and accountable to that premise and idea, because I think that's easy for us to say, oh, as an MSP, and remember, I have an MSP that I've been involved with for 15 years, in addition to my role with Nable. But I think it's super easy for MSPs to say, oh, the client's not paying for this. The client didn't, engage us to do that. But I think we've gone past the point of no return of MSPs are responsible for everything, and they're accountable for everything, and they're expected to be responsible. I thought you were taking care of that is one of the favorite things that I say. So
Yeah. 100%. Nathan?
Yeah, I love where Luis went with that, because I think that's been something that we've really pushed internally is we have to be intentional. I think for a long time, being an MSP, being a good IT consultant, if you're running halfway decent antivirus and a firewall in the place, you were ahead of the curve. Like there was a season there where like I patched my stuff and I run antivirus. You were doing great, and the world is changing so fast. And if we as an MSP are not thinking intentionally, questioning things, looking at our customers, looking at our stack, it's things like, we've had some conversations, Matt, of what is my tool set? Well, when you sit down as an MSP and look at your tool set is not your RMM and your PSA. Your tool set is your RMM and your PSA and your documentation, your accounting solution and your network monitoring solution and your RDS solution, your VPN solution. Like when you write it out and you think it through, you realize that you as an MSP have 30, 40, 50 tools you manage. Are those secure? Not just one of them secure. Have you thought through all of them? Have you mapped that out? And we've been doing the same thing with our customers. What are the gaps? What are the things we should go do an audit for on all our customers? We audited, are there open ports on firewalls that we don't know about? One of our technicians opened up a security camera port for the owner when they were on site, and we don't know about it. Have you audited that? Have you audited your open ports? Have you, looked for gaps like that? That being conscious and thinking through things is a real, you have to be intentional. You can't just let things come to you anymore.
Yeah, I actually I love the collective conscience, and mine's going to tie into this. I actually just realized I'm going to do the least amount of talking on this than I ever do, because I've got people that want to chat. So I'll say this really quickly. Mine in that collective conscience kind of vein is that our vendors have had, in a lot of ways, a lot of rope to make choices that might not necessarily be the most secure for us because of the lack of maturity of that client tree. So I would just say that there's a collective conscience of don't be afraid to ask the vendors to improve and tell them what you need and tell them where the gaps are and be a partner and share and spend time. On this call right now are the people that are the givers, right? You guys are the ones that are there feeding back to these vendors and say, no, I need better. How can I help you? What revenue do I have to attach to it? How can I help you get this through with your executive teams, right? So I'm done. Andrew, you're up. Next, we're going to bring up our surf and CISO. And then beyond that is going to be Heather Lane, a friend of mine in the OSINT space. So, Andrew, go ahead, brother.
You touched on that. You and I have gone back and forth quite a bit upon the community, the sense of community that needs to happen in the MSP industry, especially in that sub-$1 million range of MSP, because I think a lot of those folks are struggling. And if you look at all the numbers, IT Glue, report that came out, I mean, almost 40% of the MSPs are in that sub 100, or sub $1 million range, and they're
The
struggling
long
to do.
tail, as it's
Yeah.
defined, Yeah.
And I think they're struggling to keep things together personally with their techs and do all of that. The collaboration needs to happen, and the ego needs to be set aside for the benefit of the client and the
standing
welfare
right
of your
here, Andrew.
business. So
I'm standing right here, buddy. Like, that hurts.
feel me, bro.
Luis, do you want to, or Nathan, want to add anything to that before we let Andrew kind of step back?
I think this is the power of these conversations and the power of community in that, for those sub $1 million.
Hey, Andrew. Hold on. Let me show you something here, if I can.
Are you rocking your Team Orange? Let's go, baby.
I have a tier 4. When we collaborate, you get access to those people and those things just by osmosis. And I think there's a lot of value in that.
Yeah, 100%. I want to point out before I let Andrew down back into our waiting room. And actually, I don't even have to. Well, we'll figure it out. I'm not very good at this yet, but is Andrew's show. He does go out and speak a lot about how businesses in that size range can improve and be better. I jump in from time to time. He's fantastic and been on a guest on his show before as well. So thank you, Andrew, for showing up. I actually didn't know as many people would show up. I'm so humbled, but it's great. So anybody that also wants to pop in, let me know by email and I'll kind of reply if I can. So.
But
Thank you,
by the
Andrew.
way, Matt, you're just about 3 inches away from having the actual beard overlay on your beard. And so
I don't have those calves, but I'm going to try. So, yeah. All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks.
All right, man. I didn't know I was going to bring out the big guns today. What's going on? So tell me what your thoughts are. Introduce yourself to anybody and tell us what your thoughts are on what raising the tide means.
Yeah, so I'm Ryan Weeks. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer at Datto. Just messing around, calling myself the surf and CISO. That's fishing and surfing is what I'd always rather be doing. But being a CISO comes in at a close number 3. I think in terms of raising the tide, I couldn't agree more with what you said. The number of MSPs that actually ask vendors for improvement, or at least that are coming to the people that can influence that change is exceptionally low. And there's a lot of there's an atmosphere of like throwing shade or hate at vendors for not improving fast enough, but you're also not really driving the conversation. Right. And so you leave the vendors in a position where they're trying to make the decision about what's good for you and your customers. And that's not always going to be perfectly congruent with what you need. So I think definitely having those really candid conversations. I mean, I love talking to MSPs because every MSP is different. I learn something different every time I talk to one of them. And it helps me kind of contextualize my thinking about how we need to improve. And some of the biggest improvements that we've made in the past 4 years since I've joined Datto have been because of conversations with MSPs. So like that changing the tide for the channel is definitely going to start with having those conversations. But I think outside of that, I think there's also a question of who is going to be the one that pumps the water in to raise the tide. Right? Who's going to change the gravitational forces to increase the tide? Is it going to be MSPs or is it going to be vendors? And this is weird because I'm on the vendor side, but vendors are not going to drive this change. Vendors should support the change, but this has to be MSP led. If it's going to succeed, MSPs need to collaborate. We need to take this idea of a peer group and we need MSPs to start forming an opinion and creating a framework for what it means to be a secure MSP.
Yep. And
kind of self-regulating and self-governing around that. I think you've seen attempts by vendors to define frameworks for MSPs to become secure, or the transition from an MSP to an MSSP. And like frankly, I don't think anybody should be trying to do that. I think we should actually be striving to become secure MSPs or SMSPs, not MSSPs, right? Very few MSPs are going to make the change to an MSSP. But I think those MSPs that want to become more secure, part of it is going to be you need to kind of get self-organized. And I think vendors have a role to play there in terms of helping you get organized and maybe providing the forums and the funding. But I don't necessarily think we should be telling you what to do, because frankly, we're not in that business. We're in the business of building technology that you use. We can help you grow, but we shouldn't be making risk-based decisions for you. Like, you have to do that yourself.
Yeah, no, I'll give you that. I think here's where I'd only make one counterpoint, because you and I've had some really good conversations about your mission and your vision and your passion, and I will tell you, hats off. There's a lot of challenge in that. So, but what I will say that I believe is a delineation from that would be that oftentimes vendors that are VAR-centric or vendors that have existed in a certain way make it very challenging unless you do have $1 million in revenue to throw on a big deal sheet to get it into a sprint cycle, to get it into something where instead you're fighting for a new product that's going to make an ROI. And I think the big challenge I would say that every vendor, not any specific vendor, has that delivers product to a maturing market is that they have to find ways to overcome their own inertia. Luis started this conversation earlier today, but sometimes people feel that if you're going in the right direction and you don't change, you didn't cost any energy. But in the same breath, as a changing brethren of consumption does start to occur, you have to be able to be enabled to say, no, we need to rewrite our auth platform. It needs to happen. I know it's not profitable. It doesn't return anything. But if we don't do that, I can't do this. And that shouldn't be a revenue tie. I shouldn't have to tell you that's going to make $12 million more. I should be able to say there's an inherent security aspect. And so I will say I totally agree with you that the lack of standard of care, the lack of maturity, lack of capabilities around what we're even trying to deliver as an industry from MSP makes it harder for you. That being said, I will leave it with that one point.
Go ahead, Luis.
Ryan, good to see you, by the way. It's been a hot minute. No, all I was going to say is I think the duty that MSPs have is to try and raise not the tide also, but the baseline, I guess, the minimum baseline that we have, because I think the point of entry is unexpectedly low, and so you can go and do IT and almost do zero security because of this inertia that even customers have on the consumption side. It's like, oh well, nothing's happened to us. We probably don't need to do anything right now. We're good, right? And there's also the expectation that customers sometimes change MSPs and they expect they want to invest nothing but expect everything to change. And guess what? Those MSPs do? They don't do anything for that customer. They just sort of continue the status quo. And so it's sort of the raising the baseline. I think a little bit is an important part of that as well.
Yep. Any parting thoughts, my friend? And I do sincerely appreciate you taking time.
I mean, listen, I think it's what I said out as a bit aspirational, and there's going to be time between where we get there and where we are. In between now and then, you should be doing things to change and to prepare for that change. The tide is going to rise one way or another. It's a question of who's going to raise it for you. Is it going to be regulation, or is it going to be through self kind of governance? And I think regardless of what you do, you need to be working towards some minimum standard, that baseline that Luis was talking about. And at a minimum, it should be CIS Implementation Group 1, version 8
I love you.
Controls. You have to start working on that. If you're not doing that now, that is the number one thing you need to go and do right now.
Here, I'll put it in a visual because I like doing that. I only have one eye, so I got to try hard. You just said it. The tide is going to rise. Are you going to be chained to a 9-foot chain or a 20-foot chain? It makes a big difference. And at least starting to understand that you have a floor, that you do have something you have to do to rise your own self, to rise with the tide, then you don't moor yourself to the bottom of the dock, right? You start working out ways to get risers capability when water comes up. So,
well, mahalo. Right. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Good to see you, Ryan.
Yeah, you too.
Okay, so I am actually bringing in a completely non-channel person, a friend of mine that I've run into on a bunch of different CISO chats and clubhouse rooms and things. And her specialty, Heather Lane Hart, specialty is OSINT, and specifically, if I remember, around the legal space and teaching attorneys how to deal with OSINT around their space. So, Heather, welcome to the show. Thanks for showing up. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yeah,
I
perfect.
can.
Yes. Okay. So excited. I've been having lots of audio issues lately. I've been working with this guy, so I'm glad that it works. So yes, my name is Heather Lane. I also go by Hart. I kind of fell into this space, I guess, probably about 8 months ago. In mid-August 2020, I heard the word OSINT for the first time. And for anyone that isn't familiar, OSINT stands for Open Source Intelligence. And basically, I like to define that as not Facebook sleuths. If you've ever
Yeah.
seen the Netflix documentary about the Cecil Hotel, that is not what OSINT is. I will be hosting a OSINT clubhouse room later. Hopefully, Matt can join in. Anyone else who's watching, and I think I might rant about that a little bit. Anyway, so I am an OSINT investigator with the National Child Protection Task Force, and I fell into Clubhouse. My wonderful mentor, David Vaughn, he is head of cyber threat intelligence over at Equinix. He invited me, and I just fell in love. The amount of amazing people that I've met through there. I've started to host my own rooms. Other people are asking. My original idea, I like to read court documents for fun. I have the TrickBot one, the TrickBot Trojan one around here somewhere, 70 pages. I was reading
Yep.
it last night at 3 a.m. before.
Yeah, she didn't go to bed when I did. We were in clubhouse rooms talking to the CISO of NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. It was really funny. I actually choked him up on a conversation. But Heather, specifically, because I have several people also that have committed time to follow up, how could an MSP, a person that serves a client in the 100 or so user range or less, how can a managed service provider raise their tide? And also, real quick, would you name your room again? Someone had asked for your room in Clubhouse. Yes, Clubhouse is scary, but I'm poking around with my outside public phone, so not my private phone. I can talk about that later, but yeah.
So it's under the All Things OSINT Clubhouse. If you connect with me on LinkedIn, I will be more than happy to hook you up. But in the interest of time, I guess I don't really understand the question. Can you? I'm getting into the kind of
using OSINT, so using open source intelligence. How could an MSP who is under a lot of attack, right? If I, as a threat actor, the first thing I'm going to do is start gathering data about an entity, right? You do it for your purposes, but I might do it for malicious purposes. So how could an MSP, one tip you could give them to raise the tide, to help themselves in protecting their identity attack surface, if you will, or anything you could think from a normal, we go turn wrenches on computers, how can we protect ourselves as targets of aggregation for China, for other entities, right? And so that would be the question.
Oh, okay. I get it now. One thing I think I've been noticing as I've been kind of doing some recon on companies is there's a lot of I understand that MSPs and other companies, they have to market themselves and their services. They need to sell themselves, but you have to be careful about what information you're putting out there. Are you talking about security aspects of an employee schedule in your employee feature, that a threat actor is going to sit there and go, oh, okay, yeah, let me pencil that down. Because when I'm doing my OSINT for certain things, whether it's under the umbrella for CTI, I am immediately in the mindset of a threat actor. Okay, how can I use this against you? So that's one thing. Probably I would be much more aware of what's going on marketing, not necessarily just from your company, but if you have clients, are those clients in features like an advertising magazine, something like that, and there's data being leaked out that way too.
Yeah, that's great. And I think what I'm getting at, though, you popped me last night, right? When I invited you to this meeting, you're like, hey, Matt, BCC, bro, like, did you miss that? And I can't on that type of meeting invite that I sent you, but it's being cognizant. It is that shared conscience that Luis proposed as we first started. And I think that is the theme of just saying, okay, if I, as the data custodian, the data owner, or whatever it may be in that structure of this information, employees, absence, whatever it is, you named a couple of different things. I have a responsibility to make decisions upon that data and how it might be used against us, and have to think about those things. So it's your Facebook posts, it's your, I know you do deride that as the overall. That is truly the one that we think of, but it is your Facebook posts, it is your LinkedIn things, it's your connections, it's where you've used that same username, it's how you use the things about it. I mean, some of the OSINT games I've played, you're going to go get the metadata and find out where it was, what position the sun was, a known landmark. You're going to go find those in image. There are things you can do that I will find you with OSINT. That's your whole premise, Heather. And so, I'm not great at it. I think I'm like a 4.2 out of maybe 100. But no, I think, I do a decent job with OSINT, and you can do so much, and more machine learning is coming that makes that even easier. And you're going to start seeing things where you have to think about the what's available from an open source intelligence to attack you as an MSP, and how that affects you from a perspective of protecting your constituency, right? Your clients and your partners they are the ones that are ultimately going to suffer more at the hands of your failure as an aggregate. So, Heather, I really appreciate it. This is kind of our first time actually chatting on an actual thing other than, being attendances in other CISO spaces, but love to hear more about the work you're doing on the child protection side. So thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much. Take care.
See ya.
Cheers. So Matt, one of the interesting things that sort of comes out of that is like, I wonder how much fear has to play a role in people's lives before they start sort of reevaluating their stance on some of the information that they share. Because like, I'm reminded of the old email chains that used to go around, and I wonder what the objective of the MO of those was back then. Because maybe there was like some hidden HTML before we knew what hidden HTML in an email was, but this is the same thing. Like those surveys and things that pop up on Facebook, people start answering with all their personal data of all the things they use as their security, questions and stuff like that. So the fear seems to be the thing that can help change the tide a little bit.
I
hate leading with fear personally.
I don't think it's fear. You actually set me up perfectly, and I'm going to say it again today. Anybody that watched this yesterday, you can go get a cup of coffee or something. I apologize. But you, myself, and Ryan Burton are standing at the edge of a cliff. We're with an arm's length as brethren, and I calmly shove Ryan Burton off the edge. Boom. To his death. Is there any chance you don't back up? Any chance, or at least defend yourself, become in a posture that you know it's not going to happen to you, in some way separate yourself from me? Is there any chance that you watching me calmly push someone off the side of a cliff would not change your posture? It's not fear. That's data. That's empiricism. That's the understanding of finality, right? Like that is that. And let's take that further. Is there any chance that as you run down the hill while I sit there calmly, do you not tell the other guy coming up the hill to his death, hey, turn around, there's a dude pushing people off the hill up here? The point is,
but this is the issue with inertia. But this is the issue with inertia, Matt, is that the customers don't see themselves standing at the edge of the cliff. That is the problem, I think, is they don't envision, they can't realize sort of the risk that there is. And this is why I'm so bullish on this idea of MSPs really have to own the risk conversation with their customers. And that's just the way to start having that change happen, is to just start a conversation to help the customer understand what the customer thinks of as risk, where they're comfortable and not comfortable, and help them sort of move and navigate those pieces of that conversation.
I love
hi, Ryan.
Hey, Ryan. Sorry. I love that someone would push me off the cliff back, though. That's pretty legit.
I'll just pull you
Ryan Burton, if you want to introduce yourself. And the question we've been asking this whole time is, what do you think rising the tide in security and the MSP community over the next 12 to 18 months should look like? What are the themes, if you will? So.
Sure. Yeah. Hey guys, I'm Ryan Burton, VP of Product Strategy at Pax8. Work with, or have spent a lot of time with both of you guys over the years.
I'm sorry.
We lament that.
So focused on product strategy, what vendors we bring onto our platform, and then enhancements to our platform as well, and the direction where we're going from that perspective. So the question was, what does rising all ships look like? I think the biggest thing, I wanted to touch on fear real quick, because I think selling with fear, it's not really selling with fear, it's selling with reality. I mean, coming in the seat that I sit in, and I'm sure you do too, Luis, and same with Matt, we have an overview of a lot more customers than typically a small MSP might have. And so we have a lot more data, and the data is really scary, right? Because it happens on a daily basis to our partner community, right? And we hear about these stories every single day. So it's not something that is fake. It's totally real. It happens all the time, every single day. I think the thing with selling fear, you're not really selling fear. You're just trying to educate your customers on the risks so they understand the risks. If it's the risk they're willing to take, they need to understand what that risk means to them monetarily, right? And how much it would cost to reduce that risk. And it's up to them. And if the MSP wants to let them take that risk, then they should protect themselves legally, right?
Yeah.
Or find a better client who's willing to protect themselves. I think.
Well, I think you said it best, though. It's an education cycle, right? Like, this is a point where if you quantify, discuss, and understand the impacts, then you've done your job as a security professional and even as a technologist, right? Oh, what's that data worth? I tell this joke of, if you ask me to protect your Cadillac, right? So you say, overnight, I need you to watch my Cadillac. I'll pay you some money. I'm like, cool. I'll go stand outside and watch it. Now, if they had said, I have $1 billion worth of cash and bearer bonds sitting in the backseat of that Cadillac and I can't find the keys to lock it, will you protect that Cadillac? Would I protect it in a delineated way? Yeah, I'd have rifles in the first perimeter. I'd have an outside perimeter with scope. I'd have access with loudspeakers. I'd have the ability to defend a point of presence, right? And so I think the thought process, though, is that, we don't ever know the data's value because we don't ask. And so that's what part of what I'll take out of this is that part of our job isn't just the fear. It isn't just the understanding of the reality. It's just, is someone going to attack my Cadillac? Not likely. If they knew there was $1 billion in bearer bonds, yes, there'd be a host of people. I'd probably be in line. I don't know that you're paying me enough, right? Anyways, joking aside.
So Ryan said something that's interesting to me that you mentioned, and not to call you out, Ryan, but you said, if the customers are not doing the things that need to be done to raise that security baseline, find better clients. But here's the irony: is that the client you're leaving behind is the client that's going to forward that phishing email, or that's going to get hacked, and then
see it every day.
The other client, and then the chain reaction is just impossible to stop. And so, I think raising the tide really has to be how do we not leave any customer behind? No asset left behind, no customer left behind, I think is really sort of the bigger question. And it's a 10-year play. It's we have to start now. We can't invent something to solve this 5 years from now. It just has to start as a conversation.
I love you, and I love the positivity aspect of that. I think the only thing I would say is that I do see the incidents. I mean, even in my own organization, I struggle to get every incident brought to us. But even the incidents I do see, there's 30, 40 of them already this year that we've dealt with. That means if you're an MSP and you're saying, oh, it doesn't happen to me, not true. You're just not seeing it. You're not watching it. Yeah. And the challenge is those will have a finite end. I'm not a threat actor that likes to get somewhere and work my butt off to have zero return, period. There's going to be a return. So I do agree with you that I think we should try to bring as many people along. Tell them, teach them, spend time on education, make things they can't say no to that are small little boiling the frog adjustments, right? To make it more and more and more secure. But at the end of the day, some of them need to go. And I do mean that if they don't go from me, they're going to go in general when they get compromised. And it will be legal things that fall under the privacy acts that give them a lot of lawsuit capacitance, that challenge our agreements. And even if you didn't lose, do you want to go to court all the time? And I think the challenge is I actually am more on the side of, go, please, 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 see ya. And I know that I'm not the business end of this, and there's probably some real logic fault to that, but my passion says some of them probably do go either way we choose it. But
yeah, I think you're never gonna get every customer to buy into that, right? It just is what it is, and if you're willing to take the risk, great. I would suggest not taking that risk personally, just because it could be a nightmare for you in the long run.
Or really examine your agreements too. I mean, I think that's what you said earlier too, Ryan, is at least understand and quantify and control. But
yeah, and when you said rising all tides, the biggest thing I've noticed over the last year is there's a big perception gap. One, for the customers that we're talking about, but the other thing is a lot of MSPs I talk to just need more knowledge around base level security posture. So for example, and I'm even at fault of this, and so is a lot of companies. They say, well, buy this product, buy dark web monitoring, buy MFA, buy this, buy that. Well,
yeah, point solutions and solutions for a single problem when we know there's millions, right?
Exactly. It's why am I doing this? The story needs to be related. I think I took the tail end of it is we need to come up with a baseline, which I think is the CIS controls, and educate the partners on let's map everything to standards, right? Because the problem right now is we're kind of shotgun firing a bunch of stuff, and there's no central education around these are the standards out there, and this is why the standards exist. The MSPs first need to know that. They need to first pick, I would say, CIS controls, the new version. Version 8 is great, by the way. Easy to understand, very well done. It's not super convoluted, or there's not a lot of gray area to say, well, I might do this or I might not. It's very, very well done. So I'd look at the CIS controls as a starting point, and then use that to start changing their conversations with their customers. So instead of saying, customer, you need to buy these different products, well, the reason why is because they map to industry standards. And this is like, decades of research on all the attack types and the best way to reduce your risk. So that way you're not the enforcer. You're saying the standards are the enforcer. I'm just trying to get you there. Right.
Yeah. And remember, though, one of the things about this, and the reason CMMC or maturity models come along, and I'm actually just totally setting up Tim Choquette, who's next, but is that you can be very compliant to a CIS control and absolutely make zero effect on security. You absolutely can. You absolutely can scope things in a way that they don't impact the right things. You absolutely can make decisions that are very compliant but not secure. And, I'm going to do a video on this eventually, but, there's a difference between security and compliance. And so what I'd say is, yes, start with CIS controls, apply them the way every time I look back at something we've done, it's not good enough. It has to be better. It has to improve. So getting in that cadence and that cycle is probably pretty imperative as well. So just understand this isn't a single endeavor. This is a constant endeavor. It's the same reason you go, how do I tell my clients they need new tools? Because the threat changed. Because you're having conversations about risk, right? Like
starting point, right? I think right now, I think there's a lack of starting point, right? I think that there's a lot out there where partners are getting a bunch of information from a bunch of different vendors, and they don't have this is your true north to start with, versus just saying, buy this product, buy that product. I think that's one of the big issues, I think, in the industry.
Well, and as a vendor, you have to move products. I mean, let's not lie about the ecosystem that we have to sell. We have to grow. We have to build products. We have to improve products. We have to end of life products. We have to, there is a absolute give and take in the product space. And the challenge I think that you put forward, and I love this, you and I have talked about this for almost a year and a half now, is gathering from every vendor the stuff that only you have the ability to make them give you. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean in a sense of, in the business transaction, you're already inspecting their SOC compliance. You're already checking out the scope of said. You're looking at their security practices. You're gathering, do they offer SSO? You're gathering, do they? And as you do that, if you start tying those to controls and tying those to indices and making it easier for somebody that's starting out in cybersecurity to go, here's a grid. Check. Okay, I got them. Now let's make sure they're applied right. Let's go through that and get that knowledge. But at least you could say, here's the things that violate my security core values. I'm just going to go ahead and immediately rule out that vendor. If it doesn't have SSO or RBAC, I can't use them. So
and you just
awesome.
said something super important there, Matt, which is the security core values. I think this is the baseline needs to be the culture of security, because I think the assumption that we make that somebody is responsible for it. Oh, our MSP is responsible for security. I think that's the first lie that.
And we're doing the same thing to our vendors. No, but we're doing the same thing to our vendors, right? Like that's the brilliance of this. It's okay for them to go, man, they just expected me to have done it, and I can't believe it. But you turn right around and go, how dare you, vendor, not have this? Yeah, but you didn't ask. Back to Ryan Weeks' point, right? Like, yeah, no doubt. So that's brilliant. Yeah. I love it. Thank you, Luis. Brian, I appreciate you, brother.
Yeah.
Thanks for dropping in, sir.
Good to see you, Ryan.
Man, Tim Choquette live and in person. And a second copy of Tim Choquette down below. Or this one. Maybe another one. I'm not very good with technology, gentlemen. I apologize.
Clearly.
Are you here now, buddy?
Oh, we can't hear Tim.
Oh, no. I've got Shell.
Let me get my camera going.
I'm loving the comments while I'm waiting. Oh, I hear it. I think I hear Shell at least. I hear Shell.
Yeah, you'll see me in a minute.
So the cultural security, Matt, I think this is, I think an underpinning of all of this is, I think the importance of everybody adopting a opinion on security and a culture of security inside of their organizations. from all the way from the customer to the end users in their homes to the vendors and the MSPs in between is such an important part of keeping that sort of motion moving forward of like driving the security conversations. Because again, as soon as you sort of relinquish the accountability to the vendor, say, oh, my MSP is responsible for that, like that, I think is exactly where we fall into those cracks of like, well, I thought you were taking care of that. Like, why am I responsible? We hired it. We're paying you to take care of that.
Oh, there we go. We're making it. Tim, I can hear you, I think.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, man. That's awesome. There you are. Okay. I want to introduce a really good friend of mine. Tim Choquette is with Covenant Technology. They are a very Microsoft-centric, very GCC Glove Cloud, very kind of where I like to live in that forward-thinking thought space around where we take compliance and what it means for holistic, centralized security. So, maybe a little bit of a build up there, but Tim, if you want to kind of introduce and get started on what your thoughts are on Rising Tide, and I imagine they're going to be very good. So.
Well, thank you for that introduction. You're always uplifting. You might lift us up higher than we need to be, but I appreciate that very much. Covenant's all about raising the tide, right? And I think that's what you guys have all learned over this last COVID year, working within the channel. One of the things we're trying to do is get all MSPs to be secure themselves, right? Hardening themselves and making sure they're doing the right due diligence. We're helping some MSPs out there today, and we're welcoming any MSP to come to us and help us out. And that's really important that we all band together. I think one of the things that we're trying to do, and we've got some good subgroups that we're working on in different areas. Excuse me. Like CMMC, one of the areas that we're going down is CMMC level 3, that we're very close to doing. We're in the readiness stage. Now we're waiting for the Department of Defense to create the auditing accreditation board. And Matt's been quite helpful in that as well. But those are the key components. Like there's branches of us that can work together outside of working independent to collectively make these initiatives happen. And also, we're providing a lot of, I call it kind of from the Matt Lee perspective, we're on their boards. We're giving them back information from the MSP community. We want voices from the community as well on maybe how a GRC platform needs to be built, which is the platform in which the CMC side would live in, right? Well, we've talked to like 6 or 7 different groups and done scorecarding. Well, that's great. That's the whole voice of what we're doing. But what it does is allows for the future MSPs that are going to go down that route. We're paving the path. We're just setting, we're in the boat. You guys are in the wake, and we're just making this thing happen. But learning that those initiatives out there is one of the things we need to work on is letting people realize that we have these subgroups out there, and if they want to be part of it, they can come join us. And
nobody will fault you for not knowing the things, right? Joining these groups and getting the help is there to get the help.
Yep.
I think,
by
Luis,
the way, my own personal story on Tim's raising the tide, we shared a lengthy bus ride one time, and Tim was willing to give me his entire playbook on how they sort of have certain conversations with customers, what they do. And I still owe you that trip to Oregon to come down and hang out with you. But I think that is one of the things that MSPs need to do more of. Like, let's just talk more. Like, how are we solving these problems, and bring those conversations to the vendors. So 100% a key piece of that. And Tim, thanks for being that guy as well and helping raise the tide for other MSPs, because it's not just the communication back to the vendors, but it's also how we're helping our colleagues, get better.
That's exactly right. We benefit too from the groups that join up. I mean, you got Reese over there in San Luis Obispo. We got JP down in Fort Worth. We got Nathan and Daniel in Colorado. We got, of course, Matt and not even naming all of them. Getting to meet these guys, you become friends, right? You become loyalists. You become, do anything for one another. But also, you're like, I got bands of brothers now working and sisters working forward in these movements. And so, the other tracks we're doing, we have a product called Skydesk 365, which is a VDI platform with Microsoft and WBD or Amazon on the other side. There's groups out there that say, I don't have the teams to build that. I don't have the teams to support that. Well, guess what? We can work together to allow you to sell that and work that out and handle the customer directly. We can be your white label backend. There's all kinds of ways we can work together if we choose to do so.
Tim, I met with a lady. She was at Mellon New York Bank, and she was investigating cryptocurrencies. I did a speech with her about blockchain, cryptocurrencies, and what that shifts in equity pools. And I didn't know what equity pools were because I wasn't in commercial banking high enough to understand that when I was a banker. But essentially, equity pools are kind of an example of our equity of knowledge pools, in the sense that we have certain capabilities inside different orgs. But an equity pool is if GE has $2 billion they don't need till Thursday, right? And this is probably the Cadillac guy, right? But no, if G has $2 billion and somebody over at Coca-Cola needs it, they borrow it for basis points, right? 0.01, 0.02%. So 4 zeros, right? And they borrow that for 3 days and they bring it back. And so, I'm taking a little bit of a creative liberty here, but this is kind of our equity pool in the sense that I have used him and his team absolutely myself for a project I could not do. I didn't have the teams inside to do that. And so I will say that use those equity pools. I think that MSPs are willing to band together. We're a really unique industry that we are willing to help each other. And I've personally shared time with MSPs myself. I know Tim has as well. I know Luis does on a constant basis now as part of his overall endeavors and what he does to rise the tide, which I'm humbled by his setup and overall throughput comparative to mine. But I think that we have to form equity pools of knowledge inside the MSP community so that people that are inequitously lower on that can gain that knowledge, and as it grows, give it back. So, Tim, I sure appreciate you. I'm gonna give your compatriot the screen to have his version of it. Sheldon, the one thing I'll say is, Luis, did you have a curse jar when you rode with Tim on the bus for an hour? Because I am certain I'd have walked out with debt, no doubt.
I was so enthralled by the conversation that I think any curse word would have been welcomed at that point. But no curse jars with Tim. It's just awesomeness all around is all I remember from that conversation. So thank you, Tim, for being awesome.
Well, thank you guys very much. And Matt Lee, I'll one day get that bank of Matt Lee's money.
God, I can't even imagine. I might have to drive you a Cadillac over before we're done. Like, joking aside, the first time I went on a presentation with Tim, he's like, "Don't cuss, man. Like, hey, can you stop?" I'm like, "Oh gosh," and he points it out every time for the last year. I'm getting better, I think.
Shot collar I sent him. He hasn't put on his ankle yet, so we'll get there. It'll be good.
All right, let's do it, Sheldon. See you, Tim. Thank you.
You bet.
All right, Sheldon is my favorite compliance officer. Don't tell Matt Topper that. He might punch me in the head. But Sheldon, can we hear you? Are you on mute? Uh-oh. I love it. I'll go through comments while we wait on Sheldon. Someone else has a secret sailor mouth. Yeah. Yeah, it's not so secret. I love it that slow down, Heather. I can. Okay. That's so good. Slow down, Heather. Nathan needs to be vetted. It was in comment to him saying you wanted to be friends. That's great. Go ahead, Sheldon. Nice to have you on.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me on. I think one of the comments I'd like to make is the group that we have together on Fridays has been a great resource. There's a couple individuals that I actually spend an hour a week on the phone with, and we kick around ideas, and actually both are raising the tide. We're trying to sort of play a leadership role in setting the bar at least a CMMC level 3. We're trying to say, look, that probably represents the best coverage. If you do a Venn diagram of all the frameworks, you see that the NIST family covers about 95% of all the frameworks, and CMMC covers about 95% of all of the NIST frameworks. And so we found that probably as a basic level, that's going to be a really good one for going forward. It's comprehensive. It's got all the pieces that we would need, and we're finding that the security stack that we've adopted, and I won't go into that too much detail, but the stack that we've adopted really covers with a single pane of glass that framework pretty well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think CMMC 3 is probably the most comprehensive base defense, right? Like that I would want, if my kid was going to go play in a bad playground, like that'd be the base level of defense that I'd want there, because it's really getting into the meat of at least operationalizing security. And for me, it was the most eye-opening about what I sucked at. I mean, if I'm honest, right? And I think that the challenge you always fight is that balance between it being a security situation and it being a compliance situation. And the beauty of CMMC in its design phase, maybe not in its execution, as we've seen humans turn it into crap for forever now, but is that there's another person auditing it that has some contextual awareness of the protections and how they affect the actual control of control and classified information. But in our case, we would basically just consider those base practices, even though we don't handle CUI, as a methodology to frame how we handle our clients' secret data or our clients' data or our clients, whatever it may be.
Right. Yeah.
So I think I agree with you, Shell. I've been a big fan ever since we met. We do spend quite a bit of time together, not as much as I'd hope for an auditor. But, no, just teasing. But Sheldon's with Tim Choquette's company, and I am a big believer in applying a framework, but also not letting it just be a game, not letting it just be a sham. And the problem with a SOC 2 even, and the problem with that is I'm standing in rooms every week during our compliance meeting and going, yeah, we can just write that out. Yeah, we can just write that out. And you have to fight that. You have to say, no, can we change it? Can we fix it? And I think that's the beauty of a CMMC is that as you climb up those escalation levels, you can't hide much, right? And my mom does drive a Cadillac. That's awesome. I love the comments. Like I would rather spend my entire time in the comments if I'm honest. This is great. But
so let me ask you, Shel, since you're here, how much do you think it's really important, I think, to start to think of security and frameworks as the continuum that they are? Because I wonder how many people fall into the trap of thinking of security as an event, a switch that we need to turn on. We're going to go from non-compliant to compliant, but really it's just a state of mind. It's a mindset. It's something that is a continuum. So I wonder how much of the detractor that is to the general ability to increase or improve our posture.
Well, that is the risk is saying, okay, I've checked all the check boxes and I've got a framework in place and some policies even that support it, and I'm done. No, never done. It's a constant battle. Things change all the time. The frameworks themselves do some changing even. And so you have to keep going through. And we find that we're constantly evaluating risk. We're looking for vulnerabilities on a regular basis. We're looking at the alerting system that we use is really comprehensive, and so there's always something to look at. There's always something to be thinking about. One of my buddies, Nathan Taylor, we spend a lot of time together talking about some of the GRC platforms. So we're actually trying to put together a set of templates and approaches for the MSPs to really understand how to document themselves, but also how to document their clients. And we keep scratching our heads and losing sleep over, well, this particular cloud platform isn't FedRAMP certified, and their people can see our data. I mean, we'd go crazy thinking about that stuff. And Nate and I just decided to stop losing sleep over it and just do our very best. Probably at the end of the day, if you're making an effort, that'll get you a long ways down the road. But yeah, it's not a one and done. It's a way of life. And I asked this question in another forum somewhere a while back. Should you hire a compliance officer? And Matt answered that question, no. The point is you probably need an expert that can look over your shoulder and always be available, giving you advice. But security is an ongoing struggle.
Yeah. And I'll shameless plug here. So just anybody that is listening to MSP, one of the cool concepts they're kicking around is Shell as a service. So it's a SaaS platform, but it's a Shell as a service to kind of help at least that grassroots beginning in an MSP of operationalize a compliant focused strategy for security. And so I don't know if I've said that well. If I have, I need money every time you use that, if you will, Shell. But SaaS 2, that's also one of the ones I want.
The royalty checks will be coming.
Yeah. No, and Tim's not here to defend himself because I cut him out of the video. So he's the boss on that one. He said, "Press the button." All right, I'm pressing the button. No, but thank you, Shell. I really appreciate it. As always, I love the challenges you place in front of people and the way you approach, the efforts towards CMMC. So thanks for always being a partner and an advocate.
Yep. Thanks a lot.
Tim, we've got some royalty numbers to discuss. I'm fairly certain on this, but any closing thoughts? Anybody that's still connected is welcome to come back in. We're going to wrap up here in 2 minutes. So Heather, I turned your stuff on. So if you're sitting there chatting bad stuff about me, maybe hang back for just a sec, but you're welcome to come on screen. I just want to thank everybody that came today. I think Rising the Tide is, a passion of mine. It's a passion of Luis's. It's a passion of Shell's, and everybody that came here today didn't do it to sit here and speak with me. It was to come out and raise your efforts or your capabilities to defend this country that we love, that I believe in, that I give so much to try to help protect, because we really are a country of people that have been willfully ignorant for so long and have chosen to be in a position that they're not even defensible. And we do not have any more rope before the tide rises. And that's my call to action, is that do something to improve yourself and reach out to anybody you've met here, and they'd be glad to help you and give anything they can. So Heather will vet you, though, so you probably ought to check before you reach out to Heather, just in general.
I will.
So anybody got any thoughts?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Fair. Anybody have any thoughts to close out, Luis? If you don't mind, just wrap it up for us, buddy.
No, I think a number of really interesting thoughts and comments. The collective conscience, the culture of security. I think the conversation that needs to come back to the vendors at all times, but also I think the more experienced MSPs helping reach out to the smaller MSPs that have an opportunity to be influenced and affected earlier on in their journey, so that they don't sort of get really down a path that they are hard to sort of veer off of. The path of complacency, I think, is a real problem in cybersecurity. And so, yeah, just how can we all help each other is really the thing I'm getting from today's conversation, for sure.
Yeah,
Well, awesome. I may do more of these. Go ahead, Tim.
I said, yeah, we need to promote more of that and provide channels and vehicles for those MSPs to connect. I know Pax8's done a pretty good job with that with their channel, but there's other vendors out there that influence this world, right? And getting these subgroups built and creating that pool, that community for them to connect and have great topics. One thing we had last call is that we start giving each other assignments. Once you start getting in here, guys, we all start getting to work, right? And so
this is a working group. Understand the concept in general. Right? It's not a show up and say, hey, but
accountability. Yeah.
I am past our time, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time here. I will say I'm probably going to start doing these type of pop-up conversations. I like bringing people in. I like bringing in the audience in the LinkedIn comments and YouTube comments and bringing those in. So if anybody ever wants to do one of these and join in, please reach out to me. I'd love to give you stage and let's get out and have the conversation. Let's rise the tide together. So thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm going to go ahead and end the